In World of Warcraft Season of Discovery, many people on forums and community discords and online have been spewing fire and brimstone regarding the balance of SOD. Most forum posts are frustrated with the current standings of melee classes and specifically warriors dominating PvE meters. Others are frustrated with the absurd abilities like Druid Star Surge that not only hits for massive damage as an instant cast ability, but also has range that far exceeds normal spell range for other casters. Others are furious with the current state of mages and their ability to clear massive amounts of mobs using regeneration and Living Flame, a combination that makes them seemingly unkillable. And this list is just the tip of the iceberg for a community frustrated with the current state of Season of Discovery's balance. But is balance actually an issue? Is part of World of Warcraft's classic charm because of the imbalance that exists in the game? Well, today I want to answer those questions and I want you to come along on that journey. But before we start, what is balance? It's crucial we define this so we know what we are looking for while we investigate this further. Balance, simply put, is a condition in which different elements are equal or in the correct proportions. And in life, we might think of balance as fairness, equal opportunity, symmetry, stability, or Thanos.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
Plainly, we can think of balance in terms of weight. Having balance is when both groups of objects, when put on a scale, counteract one another's weight, causing no movement on the scale. But balance isn't always simple. Again, in life, one must balance responsibilities like walking your dog with playing games, with taking care of not only your physical but also your mental health, and balancing your job with your sleep schedule. And while seeing balance on a scale is obvious because we have sort of a numerical and finite way to measure it in this instance, but balancing responsibilities can be difficult to find concrete answers for because, well, balance is quite subjective. Each individual must make a value judgment on what they consider balanced for their life. And in some people's lives, that's working out for 3 hours a day. And that's living a balanced life. And for others, it's not working out at all and still living a balanced life. This is just one example of many we can make with this analogy. And I mention this because, just as in life, in video games, balance is both obvious in some cases and subjective or nuanced in others. And worst of all, in World of Warcraft, balance is particularly a challenging subject because of nuance. Or is it? In my opinion, we can define balance in World of Warcraft as the condition in which different elements of in-game content are equal or in correct proportions of accessibility and performance between specializations. What does that mean? Well, let's break it down first by classifying what is in-game content. In-game content is PvE and PvP based, but since we've played the game, we know it's a bit more complex than that, and the individual components of each endgame shed light on balance within that category. This is where the second half of our definition comes into play. In-game content are equal or in correct proportions of accessibility and performance between specializations. So let's go deeper. PvE endgame can be broken down into subcategories of collecting, instance PvP, and we can consider social aspects in endgame, but I won't talk about balancing your time in Goldshire with your time PvPing with the boys. And again, each of those categories can be further reduced. In collecting, we have gold farming, farming rare items, farming pets and mounts, farming raw resources, and professions. In instance PvP, we have raids and dungeons, which can be further deduced into roles, raw damage, healing output, survivability, player buffs, gear availability, consumables, world buffs, raid cooldowns, and I'm sure I'm even missing some things here. Then if we take a look at PvP endgame, we can further break these down as well into instanced and non-instanced PvP. And even more so within instance PvP, there's solo queue, there's group queue, there's pre-mades, and even professional tournament style PvP. And then we have non-instance PvP, where there are duels, and there's also world PvP. So while we started this by questioning balance from a PvP and a PvE perspective, where balance seems simple because we're just looking at the surface, when we probe deeper, we can see, like real life, balance is not so simple as weight versus weight. There's a lot of nuance and a lot of different aspects that contribute to each category of the game that together define balance in a section of in-game content. Because of this, we can quickly get bogged down with details when weighing balance for specific characters or classes. And to explain this further, let's do that. Let's take a look at a specific example. Let's take a look at a warrior in Season of Discovery. Warrior is notoriously bad for collecting. They don't kill massive amounts of mobs well, and while they do have a lot of cleave, they don't have a ton of tools to avoid taking damage or sustaining. So while a warrior does well against a handful of mobs, they often have to heal in between, and they are notoriously not as great, especially when compared to the character that does this content the best, Mage. And it's not even close. Mages currently are solo farming stockades in RFC using regeneration and Living Flame. There is no other class that can even come close to doing this, and it's not going to change. I thought about explaining this further, but instead I'm just going to show you this clip. It's insane. Moving on to instance PvE, Warrior can be both DPS and tank. They do the largest amount of damage in the game, they have access to significantly more consumables than what caster classes do, they have more raid buffs that can directly improve their damage, they themselves can apply universal debuffs, and have party-wide buffs that improve their own damage. They have basically universal uptime with a flat and consistent damage curve, and they are a stackable class, meaning you want to bring as many of them as you can fit into a raid composition while not losing valuable buffs. And from a PvE perspective, really the only thing that Warrior can't do is heal. Warriors, along with other melee classes, for all the reasons listed above, are exceptionally gifted instant PvEers, but Warrior by far is the best. In speedruns, top 50 guilds run 3 to 4 Warriors on average, with staggering numbers like 60.9% of tanks in top 50 speedruns are Warriors, followed by 28% being Paladins. Additionally, 47.2% of DPS in top 50 runs are Warriors, followed by Druids making up 29% of DPS. Not to mention on Warcraft logs, not including cheesed parsers of course, you have to go to the next tab before you start seeing an abundance of other classes as top damage overall. To finish my point, here's a graphic that shows the top damage of every class. Warrior destroys them all. Moving on to non-instance PvP, for the same reason Warrior is bad at collecting, world PvP and duels are challenging for Warriors. Without a full bar of rage going into a duel or a world PvP encounter, Warriors will often simply fall over. They do a ton of damage but are easily destroyed by crowd control because they do not have key counter control abilities at level 25 like they will in the future, for example. Intercept, Berserker Rage, Pummel, Recklessness, and Death Wish are all abilities that will not be available until the following level 40 bracket for Warrior. Not only do they have this weakness to CC, but they also lack sustain and counter sustain currently. Warrior lacks in ways to heal themselves during the fight, and have no way to stop casters from healing right now. Abilities like Bloodthirst and Mortal Strike aren't available until around level 40, and Warriors notoriously need these to at least compete. So while Warriors will likely be monsters in non-instance PvP, currently they are one of the worst classes. For instance PvP, however, this is not the case. Warriors are heavily needed for their ability to CC mass amounts of players with abilities like Piercing Howl and Intimidating Shout. They are also used as the primary melee snare character due to their ability to be able to spam hamstring and keep multiple enemies slowed at a given time. Pair this with Warriors being naturally very tanky, and you have one of the best frontline characters in PvP from a team-based perspective. You will often pair a Warrior with a Ret Paladin to act as a great frontline for pre-mades in Warsong Gulch and in tournament play. Just one Warrior is almost mandatory, and because of this, Warrior and instance PvP is actually pretty good. Not so good that you necessarily want more than one, but good enough that one is almost mandatory. So after all of that, is Warrior balanced? As you can see, the details get weird, because in a way, Warrior is balanced, but also it's definitely not. In PvP, Warrior fits a niche and they have clear trade-offs. They are great in a team fight, provide the best AoE control utility for the team, and have excellent engagement. Their trade-off is they can't really win in a true 1v1 right now. They just lack the toolset in the 25 bracket to do so. And in my opinion, this is balance. Not only is it balance, it's balance with the key ingredient that makes Classic feel like Classic. Characters have niche roles that they excel at that other classes can't quite compete with at their same level. But with that power comes trade-offs. Without those trade-offs, you have imbalance and characters feel bad. For example, in the same field of PvP and SOD at 25, consider Hunters. They dominate the 1v1. Pets are completely broken and seemingly do about 50 to 75% of the damage that a player can do. Then the Hunter itself does great damage, has CC in the form of Concussive Shot and Freezing Trap. They have movement from Cheetah, and to top it off, they do almost as much damage as Warrior can do in melee range. So now you can't even dead zone them to stop their damage like you could in original vanilla. Moving to team-based PvP, you can also run 2 to 3 Hunters in a pre-made, and it's an extremely strong comp. Not only is this true with casual pre-mades from Trade Chat, but also at the top end of Warsong Gulch PvP currently.
What can you do when Hunters are doing over 1,000 more damage?
The problem is I balanced their team to play with a dude who's never played Warsong Gulch before, and instead they get one of the best Hunters.
Damn.
Because the dude who
They get Hunter.
didn't show up.
It's a nasty comp that's extremely hard to beat. And for that reason, Hunter has imbalance in PvP that feels bad. They don't have trade-offs that make a class feel balanced. And for that same reason that Hunter feels imbalanced in PvP, Warrior feels imbalanced in PvE. Warriors are the dominant class, and they have seemingly zero trade-offs. No one else comes close. To build off this, it's not okay to rationalize this dominance by saying, well, in other forms of content like collecting, for example, Warrior's terrible, so therefore being the best by far with zero trade-offs in PvE is okay. This line of thinking is bad for the game. It undermines both forms of content for not only Warriors, but also other classes. It forces hyper-specialization. It reduces players to the idea that, okay, for PvE I need a Warrior, for PvP I need a Hunter, and for farming, well, I need a Mage. To its end, it feels like it eliminates choice and robs other classes of their ability to have an identity at all. However, if you take this to the exact opposite extreme, in a lot of ways we can think of retail World of Warcraft, a place where all classes can do all these forms of content seemingly extremely close to the same level to each other. This is hyper generalization and also feels bad. Here, we also lose class identity because the uniqueness between each class is not in its capabilities, it's in its particle effects and spell names. But really, this is just a facade, an illusion of uniqueness. At this end, there's no niche to fill because everyone can do everything. Really, the Goldilocks of balance, in my opinion, is somewhere in between the current state of SOD and the current state of retail. And really, for most characters, I think SOD is pretty balanced. The glaring issue is that some specs have such a large advantage and no trade-offs that it makes the balance gap between performing and non-performing classes feel way larger than it is. Classes like Warrior and PvE need to be tuned down, while finding a way not to completely destroy them in PvP. Finding a way to bring their DPS down by just 40 to 50 DPS might completely change the meta and make PvE feel way less dominated by Warriors, and therefore making other classes feel better balanced. Classes like Hunter and Priest being reined in from a PvP perspective, on the other hand, would make their respective competition feel way more balanced as well. They are just so far ahead of other classes that other classes just can't compete. Again, they dominate in an area without having major trade-offs, and this is a big problem. And lastly, mages. There's a reason that in Wrath of the Lich King Classic, Blizzard introduced dungeon mechanics that made dungeons extremely hard to farm for mages, and it really was a good thing, not only for the economic balance, but also for player power. It feels terrible knowing that on a mage, you can just go make significantly more raw gold from farming than you can on basically any other class. Not only this, but you feel pigeonholed into this form of farming because, at least for Wrath of the Lich King, are you going to go do dailies or grind quest for literal pennies on the dollar? I don't think so. Mages from a collecting standpoint need to be reeled in, and that's so balanced in that content feels better for every other class. And I don't want anyone to get confused with what I'm saying here. Balance is always something to strive for and is really never achieved. Like we talked about, it's subjective. Oftentimes, it's hard to put a finger on, and surely we don't want imbalance where character choices are made for us. But on the other hand, we also don't want perfect symmetrical balance that makes the game feel the exact same for all characters. SOD is on the right path for balance, and I think SOD is so close to a type of balance that is fun for all players, where classes feel unique and not samey. The only glaring issue here is that some classes just outright dominate areas of endgame, and it's not even close. If Blizzard could find a way to rein in some of these outliers, or bring all classes closer to them, I think SOD could really be something special, and I hope these past couple of months have shown Blizzard that. But I just hope to see some changes before this becomes too large and Blizzard has to start taking major power from players or end up pushing those that chose the wrong class out of the content that they enjoy doing. And while I think at level 25 balance is just a small fire in the proverbial house, let's not wait to see if it goes up in flames. I've been Java Monkey J. Like and subscribe. Peace.